Mention the name James O'Keefe, and you generally get one of two reactions. The first reaction that some people will give you is that he's a hero, an absolute throwback to the days of good undercover journalism. The other reaction is kind of like a line from an old Paul Simon song. You spit on the ground every time his name gets mentioned. But either way, there's no doubt. Over the years, James O'Keefe's work has absolutely blown wide open stories that people didn't have necessarily all the context of or didn't know all the facts here to with. But it's his latest effort that is absolutely going to shake up the 2024 election and blow some holes in some current political theories. What am I talking about? Hang on, folks. We're going to get into all this in just 1 second. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your front porch conservative. Step on up to my electronic front porch and let's talk. Earlier in the day on Wednesday, January 31st, James O'Keefe, the head of the O'Keefe Media Group, or as it's better known by its ironic initials OMG, released a 13-minute video on his Twitter page that is absolutely blowing up some theories about the 2024 election that are currently floating around right now, and give some insight in terms of what's going on in the White House. So I thought it might be fun to break down some clips of that video and kind of explain what's going on. O'Keefe met with a gentleman named Charlie Krager, who works in the White House. Now, I will tell you up front for the sake of context and also for the sake of trying to be fair. I don't know what the circumstances were in terms of how O'Keefe made this meeting happen, but upon securing the meeting, he made arrangements to meet at a public restaurant and have a conversation with this individual, Charlie Krager. So the first couple of clips I want to play establishes who this gentleman is exactly inside this White House that is currently in Washington, D.C. So we'll start from there. Folks, I want you to take a listen to this as James O'Keefe introduces us to one Mr. Charlie Krager. Take a listen to this.
Charlie Krager is a cybersecurity policy analyst and foreign affairs desk officer in the executive office of the White House. He manages two federal agencies and for the last 4 years worked at the State Department. He works on the president's priorities, executive orders, is a high-up official, and cybersecurity subject matter expert. I met with him undercover on Sunday, January the 21st, with my hair dyed, wearing fake eyeglasses. Not only did he not recognize me, he sang like a bird. His social media, which was scrubbed after my initial meeting with him, says he likes long walks on the beach and diplomatic negotiations.
Are you familiar with the Kennedy School at all?
Harvard? What about that?
Yes, I'm in the executive education program there at
Really?
So I got a job at State Department.
The State
It's like I essentially started at Georgetown and I applied at State. I went to Georgetown for my master's, where I studied when I joined the security studies program in the School of Foreign Service. So when I was there, I focused on like cybersecurity and technically cyber intelligence. So like the espionage and the spy game that cyber intelligence.
You really are James Bond, aren't you?
I know. My grandmother likes to be like, he's a spy. My parents are like, you can't say that. Don't tell people. Don't say that.
Don't say that you're a spy.
That makes you like a target. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I mean,
but no, I'm not a spy. I work for the White House. So I do oversight and management, and so my job is to helps oversee like responses to cyber incidents and cybersecurity problems. And so I manage two federal agencies, the State Department and USAID. So I like have recurring meetings with them where we talk about goals and we talk about the president's priorities and like how are they coming on certain executive order deliverables and like all of this.
Okay, so we're talking about someone here who has a certain amount of influence inside the White House. Now, is he high level? I can walk into the Oval Office anytime I need to talk to the president? No, but he does serve a very important function in the administration that Joe Biden currently heads up. and he's got very important responsibilities. So we're talking about a person with a certain amount of access and a certain amount of influence. So he goes on to establish his credentials a little bit further in the next clip, and this one's a little shorter than the first. It only runs about maybe 30 seconds or so. But I want to play these two clips up front to kind of get you the idea of who this gentleman is. We're not talking about an intern here. We're talking about somebody with very important responsibilities inside the executive branch of the federal government. So that sets up clip number 2. Folks, take a listen to this.
Charlie Krager, who works in the executive office of the White House, says he's the president's voice, and his mission is to protect networks, promote the president's priorities, work with the Security Council, and other parts of the White House.
We are like the president's voice when we go into meetings in terms of discussing and promoting the president's priorities. And
So you're like the enforcer.
Kind of, yeah. And the State Department people are more difficult, high maintenance.
Why is that?
They call me demanding.
Why are they more high maintenance than the State Department?
Because the State Department has a big ego. So don't.
Well, I'm sure that the folks over at Department of State were real happy when they heard that one. Okay, so we know who this guy is. We know what he does. We know that he serves very important functions inside the executive branch on behalf of the Biden administration. So as O'Keefe and Charlie Krager are talking along, they inevitably get to the subject of the boss, Joe Biden. And it's here when things start getting really interesting. O'Keefe, being the expert fisherman for information that he is, starts asking questions as it relates to Biden. So take a listen to this 30-second clip, and I think you're going to find this one very interesting because there's scuttlebutt inside the White House that everybody apparently is talking about and everybody's privy to. So with that said, that sets up our next clip. Take a listen to this.
Charlie Krager, who works in the executive office of the White House, got to talking about President Joe Biden. I told him I love everything that Joe Biden does, but asked Charlie about Biden's mental fitness.
I love everything that Biden is doing. I love his policies. It just seems, just witnessing it just looks, it's a bad look. I mean, he struggles to talk.
Yes, he's no Barack Obama.
Is he going to be the nominee?
Yes. And she will be the vice president nominee.
Okay. The folks in the White House know Joe Biden's public appearance doesn't look good, but they are more or less resigned to themselves. Biden's going to be the nominee, and Kamala Harris is going to be the VP, which blows a big hole in a current theory that's running around right now, that somehow Joe Biden would be swapped out for somebody else. Gavin Newsom, Michelle Obama, whoever it may be. But somehow, somewhere, sometime before the Democrat National Convention in August, that Joe is not going to run. Now, that said, again, for the sake of fairness and context, it could very well be that what I just described will happen. Joe decides he doesn't want to run. I personally don't believe that theory for various reasons, but you know what? I could be wrong too. I just think there's a lot of substantive reasons why it's going to be exceedingly hard, if not, pardon my language, damn near impossible to get Joe Biden to give up running again for a second term. But as Charlie Krager, who works in the Oval Office, I should say executive branch, will tell you, yeah, they're all anticipating Joe's going to be the nominee. So O'Keefe presses a little bit further on Joe, and Krager's got a few more comments to make. So, folks, take a listen to what is said next.
Agree with everything Biden is doing. It's just his cognitive ability. Like I have a grandfather who's 91, and Joe Biden is worse than my grandfather who has dementia.
Yeah.
You know, he's sort of walking like this, and he's sort of like, you know, and I think that voters are going to look at that, and it's going to hurt us. I think that independents are going to look at that, and they're going to be like, I can't deal with that. But with him, I know. He's got dementia.
Well, Tommy hasn't clinically yet.
No, yeah.
But he's definitely slowing down.
My question is, are the people like your colleagues or the White House or whatever, do they get it? Do they know that?
I think that they probably do, but no one in modern history has ever said, like, we're not going to renominate the president for a second term. That just hasn't happened.
So they know that he has those issues.
I think so.
But they're not
the
willing to say
polling
it.
shows it. And,
They're not willing to say it
correct.
publicly.
It seems
They know it, the polling shows it, and they're just not willing to say it publicly. Oh, this is probably one of the more interesting conversations that's been had in a restaurant in Washington, D.C. in a very long time. So, we know what the White House staff, or at least a lot of people in the executive branch, think about the boss. So that gets to the next question. What do they think about the boss in waiting, Vice President Kamala Harris? Well, Charlie Krager's got a few thoughts on that. So let's take a listen to what he thinks is going to be the result of how things will turn out for her. Folks, catch this next line because this is very interesting.
will be the vice president nominee.
Yeah, I don't.
There was a debate about removing her from the ticket, but sadly they didn't.
Oh, did you just catch that? There was a debate about removing her from the ticket, but sadly, they didn't do it. This has been rumored for a while. Now, granted, again, context and who we're talking about here. We're not talking about somebody who's working in the Biden-Harris campaign. We're not talking about senior staff at that level or senior staff inside the executive branch. We're talking about a gentleman who works in a very particular niche area, but as with any workplace, people stand around the water cooler, they talk to each other. They pop into an office, they say, "Hey, how you doing?" "Oh, I don't know, how you doing?" "Hey, did you hear about thus and such?" People talk. And apparently, he's one of those people that really likes to talk. But there is one more comment that he makes as it relates to Kamala Harris, and I really think this one's kind of important. So, folks, that sets up our next to last clip. This one runs about 30 seconds. Take a listen to this because this is very telling.
And same thing with Kamala Harris, is she's not popular, but you can't remove the first black lady to be vice president from the goddamn presidential ticket. Like, what kind of message are you going to send to, like, all the African American voters?
So that's the reason why they won't remove her.
That's what I think. How would you spin that? People would be like, what the f-? Like she's a woman and she's multiracial and she's like,
but she's not popular.
Charlie.
Now, again, for the sake of fairness, some of this is his opinion. But then again, if you stop and think about it, how many of us who may or may not be supporters of Joe Biden have come to the same conclusion? They dare not take the risk, they being the Biden White House or the Biden campaign, can't take the risk of removing her because if they do, how is that going to look to certain and large portions of the African American community that the Democrats desperately need to hang on to with this election? So it's going to be Biden, at least in theory, and it's going to be Kamala Harris. They can't afford to get rid of her. But that gets to the other major political theory that's going on right now, that somehow, some way, Joe Biden is going to step aside and the Democrats will plug in someone else, Gavin Newsom, or the popular theory running around right now is that it will be Michelle Obama. Well, old Charlie Krager, who works in the executive branch of the federal government, does have something to say as it relates to that theory, and that sets up our last clip. Folks, I want you to listen to this. Now, again, for the sake of fairness and for the sake of context, he's going to give you some information here that's a little bit dated, and you'll understand what I'm talking about as soon as we get done with the clip. Folks, do me a favor and take a listen to this last clip.
Charlie Krager says he's just telling us what he's heard in the executive office of the White House.
I've had a meeting with Michelle Obama at one point when I was an intern, and someone asked her, "Will you ever run for office?" And she said no, emphatically.
Really?
She said, "I will never run for office. It does not interest me. I've seen how, like," she said it a lot more eloquently, of course, than I'm going to say it, but she was like, "I've seen all the shit my husband has had to go through, and that does not interest me."
Okay. Again, for the sake of context and for the sake of fairness, this conversation that he was involved in was some years ago, back when he was an intern, which means he was still in college. And that would have probably put it, I'd say, somewhere, let's say between 2012 and 2016. So it's been some years since Charlie Krager's had direct contact with the former First Lady. And you never know, maybe things have changed. But if Michelle Obama still has the same attitude now that she did back then, in other words, I've seen what Barack went through and I have no interest in putting myself through that, then more or less that clinches the thinking of some people, Rich Barris, Robert Barnes, among many, many others, myself included, albeit for different reasons, that Michelle is not going to be the Democrat nominee for president. And again, I and everybody else who holds this theory could be dead wrong. But you've got somebody inside the White House who at one time or another has talked to Michelle Obama and is more or less of the conclusion that some of us are. She's not going to do it. Think about it. She and Barack Obama right now have multi-millions of dollars in the bank, multiple houses around the country. They're living a wonderful life, stress-free, without the aggravations and the headaches and the pressures that come along with being the first couple living in the White House. Why in the world would Michelle Obama ever want to go back to that kind of a pressure cooker situation? So yeah, these clips broke today, and I tell you what, I'll spare Charlie Krager showing you the last part when James O'Keefe reveals to him that he has been part of an undercover journalistic sting operation. Krager's got enough problems right now without me having to rub that in his nose. But I thought all this information was really interesting and enough that I wanted to bring it to you. Now, again, people can have their opinions about James O'Keefe and how he acquires the information he does. That's all debatable. But if nothing else, one thing is certain. The information that this Charlie Krager passed on to James O'Keefe starts confirming and disabusing some current political theory that's floating around right now about the 2024 election. And I thought it was interesting enough I'd bring it to your attention. Hope you enjoyed it. But that's what I've got to say about it. Tell me what you've got to say. As we start to wrap up this video, please do me some favors as always. Number one, if you're not a subscriber to my channel, please do so. Number two, please leave a comment below. I would love to know what you think about all this. Number three, please hit the bell for notifications. I want to make sure you're always aware when new videos and new live streams are coming out, and that way you can be a part of it. Number four, share this video around. And finally, give me a thumbs up. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your front porch conservative, and I'll see you next time.